Story 1. The new James S. A. Corey series just released Live Suit, a novella about human soldiers wearing super advanced power armor, and the ending absolutely shocked me. The suits are made with amazing nanotechnology, and the humans that sign up to use them are sealed into their suits for the entire duration of their tour of duty. The suits manage all your biological needs for you and keep you supplied with nutrients, so you never need to take them off. Whenever you're wounded, the suit automatically provides first aid and uses more nanobots to replace whatever has been damaged. The twist ending is that a suspicious soldier puts his friend into a medical scanner, and it shows that his entire head has been replaced by the suit. His friend is dead and has been for a long time. The protagonist resigns himself to his fate and realizes that nobody ever finishes their tour of duty. They just get replaced in a ship of Theseus style and serve forever. Story 2. The scene in Pinocchio, 1940, when his friend gets turned into a donkey. It's actually staggering just how dark they went with that sequence for a children's film. Story 3. In the Road. The scene where the father and son find the basement full of cannibals is disturbingly graphic for a movie that is not even categorized as horror. It is unsettling in its subtlety. Story 4. The Elder Scrolls. Oblivion, when you interrupt the remaining speakers of the Black Hand as they cannibalize and generally abuse the corpse of Lucien Lachance after torturing him to death. Also, Matthew Bellamont semi-preserving and basically worshipping his mother's rotting decapitated head. The rest of the game has mild gore and some spooky parts, but the end of the Dark Brotherhood questline stands out. Story 5. The scene in Animal Farm where the duck is killed and without cause is written in its blood as an addition to the rule: no animal shall kill another animal. Story 6. The Brave Little Toaster. Too many scenes to choose from. Story 7. That one SpongeBob episode where they drop the couch on Squidward's toe, and it slowly rips off the nail. I almost threw up as a kid watching that, ha ha ha. Story 8. In Schindler's List, when the girl in the red coat appears again, lifeless, it's not a horror movie, but it's one of the most haunting moments in cinematic history. Story 9. The scene from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory from the 70s where they ride the boat through the tunnel. That freaked me out so much as a kid. Also, any appearance from the Lich from Adventure Time. Story 10. Radium Girls, the way the radium destroyed the women's bodies. So horrible and painful, and nothing could be done to help them. And no one was ever truly held responsible for allowing it to happen. Story 11. I was a kid who loved to read, and my 7th grade social studies teacher recommended a book called The Frontiersman to me. I read it, and there's a scene where Native Americans have captured a man and are torturing him to death. Among other things, they're loading black powder muskets with a double charge of powder and no ball and firing them at his genitals from very close range. Eventually, they take mercy on the man and burn him alive. The descriptions of that have stuck with me for close to 30 years now. Story 12. Piers Anthony's short story, On the Uses of Torture, is not horror. It's mostly political. However, it is not fun to read. Aliens communicate through torture. Disfigurement from torture is regarded as a high honor. The more you withstand, the higher you rise on the ladder. The main character describes in detail being cut, burned, flayed, having joints crushed, being pulled apart, and having acid poured into his wounds. By the end, he has endured so much that he is seen as equal to a supreme leader who can make any decision he wants. If he continues to death, he will be immortalized in the Aliens Chronicles and treated as though he were a god in their theology. It's not an easy read. Story 13. The end of the Metalhead episode of Black Mirror is so bleak. She spent the entire episode running from a single one of those things that was hunting her relentlessly, and it didn't matter even after she killed it. Militaries around the world are racing to build these things too. Story 14. When Bigwig gets caught, and the warren that precedes it. When Hazel gets shot, the fight at the end and General Woundwort attacking the dog. Story 15. At the end of Schindler's List, where he is realizing he could have done more, he looks at his watch, his car, his possessions, and is counting how many more Jewish souls could have been spared from the Nazis while weeping and being consoled by the group of saved Jews. Story 16. Might be in Red Dead Redemption 2, when you go take Beaver Hollow from the Murphy Brood. There are decapitated, disemboweled corpses strung up on display, and a whole bunch of other disturbing things. There's more in that game as well: the Skinner brothers, Night Folk, the serial killer with the paper clues, but the Murphys stuck out to me as particularly unsavory. And maybe Oberyn Martell's death in Game of Thrones. Also, Whoreson Jr. in The Witcher 3, just him in general. Story 17. That scene in Schindler's List with the girl in the red coat haunts me too. It's chilling how such a small detail can carry so much emotional weight. Definitely one of those moments that stays with you long after watching. Story 18, The Good Place. That series finale was so existentially disturbing to me. I lost sleep for a week over it. It was supposed to be sweet and poignant, peaceful and happy. It was absolutely panic-inducing for me though. Story 19. The film Beast, the true story about Ingrid Olderock, the woman of the dogs, notorious member of the fascist Chilean regime whose main job was to train an array of dogs to interrogate, punish, and torture suspected detained left-wingers. The scene where the woman from the resistance is alone in a cell detained, hoping for mercy, and then the door opens and Ingrid is there with a team of dogs, some with visible hard-ons, and the detainee's face just falls and she starts crying. She knows exactly what's going to happen. Story 20. The Brave Little Toaster. Take your pick of trauma scenes. For me, it's a toss-up between the air conditioner suicide and the flower that loved Toaster's reflection so much she died when he walked away. Story 21. When I was a kid, I saw the movie Rock-a-Doodle, and the scene where the rooster gets pinned underwater gave me so much anxiety. It greatly disturbed me for a long time. Story 22. The World According to Garp, 1982, starring Robin Williams. When he finds out that his wife is having an affair with one of her students, he races home, accidentally crashes into the car in which the couple is having sex, and the result is very disturbing. Story 23. Overlord downloadable content for Mass Effect 2. You help out with an incident at a research base that goes silent. It turns out that a researcher puts his autistic brother in an inhumane experiment that ends with him going rogue. Square root of 906.01 equals 30.1. It all seems so harmless. Story 24. Book. What the narrator's mother saw shortly after coming home in We Need to Talk About Kevin. Movie. Ending of The Wicker Man, and plot twist of Primal Fear. Story 25. There's a scene in Downton Abbey where the patriarch stands up at the table and just spews blood all over dinner. Plot arc for a ruptured ulcer, but man, I was not expecting the horror movie moment with my tea and lace. Story 26. In the book Sophie's Choice, perhaps in the movie as well, I don't remember, when Sophie's boyfriend urinates on her at the side of the road. Of course, nothing in the book is more disturbing than Sophie's Choice. Story 27. Pick pretty much any scene from Come and See. The one that really sticks with me is when they are leaving the now deserted village. Brilliant filmmaking. Story 28. The trench melee scene in The Kingsman is so brutal to me. A group of Germans and a group of British meet in the middle of the night, in no man's land, trying to recover some important intelligence. Both sides make note that if a gun goes off, then the whole area is going to be lit up. So it's a brutally silent action scene. No music, just the sounds of hits and cuts and muffled screams from inside gas masks. It's horrifying to me. Story 29. I don't know what the game is called. Might be DEF CON. I don't know. In the game, you have control of a world power's military. As the DEF CON level slowly decreases, you get more assets. At DEF CON 1, you get unrestricted use of nuclear weapons. It's hard to describe how horrifying it is without just telling you to look it up. It's technically a strategy game, but at the end, it feels like a horror game. Story 30. In the Wasp Factory, when Eric checks under the metal plate holding the baby's head together and finds maggots digesting the child's brain. That whole book is a tough read. Story 31. I can't remember the specific scenes in detail since it's been so long ago, but the black scary goo from the cartoon, Ferngully, The Last Rainforest, used to terrify me as a kid. Story 32. There is a scene in the Jackie Chan movie Rumble in the Bronx where the bad guys have two gang members and intend to send a message to the rest of the gang. They take one guy and feed him into a woodchopper. The scene doesn't show much after the guy goes in, so there's no gore, but it is all implied. The next scene is what stuck with me as a kid, and I am now here writing about it almost 30 years later. The surviving gang member is sent back dragging huge trash bags and in a state of shock. As his friends look in, you realize it's the leftovers of the wood chipper guy. They didn't show any gore or anything, but the thought of seeing my friend go out like that, then not knowing if I would too, and finally being made to drag bags full of my friend's viscera back home. Ugh, it gives me the heebie-jeebies now just thinking about it. Story 33, Red Dead Redemption 2, the scene with Arthur's illness. When the main character learns that he is terminally ill, the sense of dread intensifies with every cough. Story 34. The disturbing level is a bit mitigated knowing that the victim largely deserved what happened, but the scene in Law-Abiding Citizen, when Clyde exacts his revenge on Darby. Like I said, the guy was a scumbag, and I wasn't exactly shedding a tear over him dying, but that scene definitely stays in the mind well after the movie is over. What's even crazier is that they don't even show any of what actually happens, but just the descriptions Clyde gives of what he is going to do and how much he plans on prolonging the suffering really hits hard, even knowing how bad of a person Darby is. Story 35. Definitely Gmork crawling out of its cave in the never-ending story. My inner child is still greatly concerned with this scene even after all these years. Story 36. There's an old Betty Boop cartoon called Judge for a Day, where Betty daydreams about punishments for people who annoy her. The man who always parks his chewing gum steps on a piece of gum on the sidewalk, and it gets stuck to his shoe. He tries to unstick it, and another part of him gets stuck to a piece of gum. This goes on until he is completely webbed in chewing gum and screaming to get out. I still cannot watch Fleischer cartoons because of that specific Betty Boop scene. Story 37. United in Anger shows real footage of people pouring their loved ones' ashes on the lawn of the White House. It was a 1992 ACT-UP protest against the government's treatment of the AIDS and HIV crisis. It's empowering and inspiring, but that was the first time I was able to understand better the anger, desperation, and grief everyone felt at the time. It's disturbing that it had to get to that point, and it's disturbing imagining letting go of my loved one by dumping their ashes on the White House lawn. I'm sure plenty of folks would be honored from beyond the grave to be involved in such an impactful act, but I think about how not a single person who died asked to be a martyr. Story 38. Warhammer 40,000 has too many to count. I think the Demonculaba is up there, though. Basically, imagine if the Dune axolotl tanks were made by a guy not worshipping Satan but worshipping four Satans who cared only about results. Though the whole being captured and turned into sentient soup and drank while alive is also horrific. That was to the Drukhari what mozzarella sticks are for you or me. Story 39. Haven't seen it mentioned yet, so there's a movie, based on an equally fantastic book, called Watership Down, about a group of rabbits looking for a place they can call home. Sounds cute and heartwarming, right? Ha ha ha, wrong. So very wrong. As it turns out, a lot of things can kill rabbits, and while neither book nor movie shy away from that, this was a rare case where the movie got to me worse. There's plenty of horror bits, but the worst is a surreal nightmare-esque sequence showing what happens when you fill a burrow filled with adorable bunnies with poison gas. It isn't pretty. Couldn't get out. There was a strange sound. Bonus fun thing? It came out before there was a fully established rating system. It was rated general audiences. How many parents do you think unwittingly showed their kids a cute general audiences rated movie about fuzzy little animated bun-buns? Story 40. Bus crash in the sweet hereafter. Bruce Greenwood plays a dad, driving behind the bus waving at his kids. He sees it happen. I had to pause the movie. It's not gory or anything. It's the absolute real-life horror of seeing and not comprehending, yet sort of comprehending that the worst has just happened. I randomly ran into Bruce Greenwood one day and told him that his performance in that scene has stayed with me for all these years. Story 41. Cyberpunk 2077. The part where you're trying to find Evelyn and you have to look through a snuff brain dance through the eyes of the person getting killed in what is quite possibly the most brutal way you could die in the lore of Cyberpunk. Story 42. Growing up, I watched a lot of shows from the 1980s because that's what my mom enjoyed, so I started liking them too. I was probably somewhere between 9 and 11 years old when I first watched the episode of MacGyver where his friend, who lived deep in a jungle somewhere, fell into a bunch of killer ants. They swarmed over him and ate him. This scared me for a very long time. Story 43. Without spoiling it, the battleship scene in Three Body Problem is one of the most disturbing things I've ever watched on a big-budget television series. It's made worse by the fact that it's supposedly the good guys carrying it out. Story 44. In the Ken Kesey book, Sometimes a Great Notion, the character of Willard Eggleston impacts one of the main characters, Hank Stamper. Backdrop: Oregon logging town, 1950s. It is a union town and striking, but the Stamper family business is non-unionized and defying the strike. The town economy is suffering as a result, and nobody is going to Eggleston's cinema. Willard privately tells Hank that if he doesn't join the strike, he, Willard, will kill himself for the life insurance money by driving his car off a cliff. He says he'll make it look like an accident, pick a rainy night, and so on. Hank calls his bluff and basically says, "Do what you gotta do." A couple of nights later, in a rainstorm, Willard accidentally drives his car off that cliff. Hank hears about it a day or two later. He has nobody to tell and never learns that it was an accident.